All right, welcome back to the program. In case you're just joining us, it's time for our second conversation. And we're looking at the creation of InfraCo. What does it mean? Engineer Ahmad Zakari, the special advisor to President Buhari on infrastructure, is seated with me here at the table. Welcome, Engineer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy.
In fact, I must say he's one of the 6 special advisors. The President has 6 special advisors, and a lot of essays and a lot of SSs. So welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let's get started, and let me start from the foundation,
Yeah.
that's the foundation of this InfraCo. There was a meeting, the CBN Roundtable, going for Growth 2.0 last March, where we saw ministers, business titans, economists, captains of industry, different people come together at the central bank. In fact, I was there at that meeting that day. And I remember that even after the meeting, it was mulled that InfraCo should be created. In fact, about 15 trillion naira. But since that time till now, we've seen the metamorphosis, so to speak. Speak to me about perhaps what has happened from that time till about now.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. As you mentioned, there were very excited discussions that happened at the Bankers Committee session, including the engagement they had that dinner with the President. In parallel, if you recall, the National Economic Council, through a committee that was led by Governor El-Rufai, was also looking at this infrastructure financing concept and how to leverage some of the pension operators to do that. And these 2 subsisting proposals were looked at, and President Buhari, in his wisdom, had asked that His Excellency the Vice President chair a steering committee to look at both concepts and find some synthesis between them. The outcome is the announcement that we're very happy about the kickoff and the approval for InfraCo to commence.
So what does the InfraCo mean? For an average Nigerian that is watching us right now, what does the InfraCo mean and what will it do?
So if you think about it, Nancy, I'm sure you recall the 2015 Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan that stated that Nigeria needed to spend something along the lines of $3 trillion
for the next 30 years.
Over 30 years, yeah. which amounts to about $100 billion per year in infrastructure. Now, this is not going to be all government spending, obviously, but that is the infrastructure gap that's needed to ensure that as our population grows, that we're able to have enough infrastructure to keep our economy going. And coming into this administration, President Buhari has had a laser focus on infrastructure, and we've continued to think of innovative and imaginative ways to find financing to bridge that gap. Some of the programs we have, the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, where about $650 million was given to NSIA. If you recall, we're doing the road infrastructure tax credit scheme, where Dangote and NLNG, for example, are doing the Obajana-Kaba Road and the Boni-Bodo Road, respectively. And what this InfraCo is coming in to do is along that same lines of getting more financing and money available for infrastructure. So the initial seed capital is $1 trillion that will come from the Central Bank of Nigeria, the Africa Finance Corporation, AFC, and then the Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA. What it'll essentially do is it'll look at certain public assets as well as new greenfield private assets in roads, rail, as well as power, to mention a few. and it will fund those projects in an accelerated fashion to ensure that the investors in those projects, to start with those three entities, but it will grow, can get a return on their investment, but Nigerians can also feel the effects of the infrastructure on the ground.
So we're seeing the CBN, the NSIE, as well as the EFC. Is there a room for the Bankers Committee and perhaps other private sector stakeholders to be part of this InfraCo? Because if you take a look at this, the CBN, EFC, NSIE, of course, majority government. So how can the private stakeholders be part of this development?
So you need to start somewhere, and the CBN governor always says, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and this is just to catalyze and kick off. To get to 15 trillion, there's going to be additional investors. There'll be a second call where the banks, pension operators, and others can come and invest in equity and or debt. And then the assets that will be transferred into this from the government will also form a basis for that 15 trillion. So the approval is just so we can get quickly going, and there's laser focus on it between the three entities that are bringing the seed capital. But very soon you'll see that there'll be incremental investment crowded in to ensure that the large gap that we have in infrastructure, we can begin to close it.
Okay, how soon are we expecting the takeoff of the company? Is there a date to it?
So I'd say, very soon. The entity registration now is ongoing. There's a review on setup and structure, but there's meetings every week on it. His Excellency the Vice President, the Governors Forum, as well as the Central Bank Governor, who will be the chairman, are driving very aggressively. I'd say you're going to hear more within the month about the progress.
Okay, if we take a look at the NSIE involvement, their involvement, is it coming from the infrastructure fund? Because when the NSIE was created, it has three components, which the infrastructure fund is part of it. We know that the NSIE is also involved in the second Niger bridge and all of that. So is this contribution to InfraCo PLC perhaps later? Perhaps we expect that it will be listed on the stock exchange too.
Perhaps.
Is the components of the NSIE coming in from the infrastructure fund?
No, well, probably a better question for Uche, but my understanding is NSIE has a number of different funds. They will continue to maintain those. They are coming into InfraCo as an equity investor at the NSIE level, and InfraCo will run independently of the other funds that it has. This is not intended to absorb the critical work that NSIE does. So the government fully expects NSIE to continue to creatively engage in a financially prudent way with the funds that it has and the progress we continue to see it make, while InfraCo will be an additional investment for them.
Why do you think that our infrastructure deficits over the last donkey years, have been there, even with all the efforts to tackle that situation? At least you have a lesser eye view to it now. Since that is your office, you would have looked at, okay, these are the infrastructure we have, both soft and hard infrastructure in the country, but why haven't we been able to develop to a certain level? Because when I took a look at some African countries and their infrastructural levels, Nigeria is not even among top 10. You're seeing the likes of Ivory Coast, the likes of Sao Tome and Principe, the likes of other smaller countries in quotes. So why are we where we are now?
So I think there for a long time has been a thinking that government can do it all. And President Buhari has come in with a view that we must get our infrastructure better. At the top of the program, I spoke a bit about some of the efforts that are being made, And this Infra-Co is one of those efforts, a big one, to ensure that while the administration, through the leadership of the president, is ensuring more judicious usage of our resources to put it into infrastructure, we also know that the private sector, investment vehicles, the sovereign wealth fund, all of these things together are going to be needed to ensure that we can fill our gap. So I think the change in mindset that this administration is driving, we hope will continue into the future, and with all the initiatives that are being set up, and that will take us away from this thinking that infrastructure is a government problem. Government should be the only one to fund it, and ensure that all of our available resources, be it in different in public-private partnerships, the NSIA, AFC, as well as you mentioned, the Bankers Committee, etc. Everybody has to get on board to ensure that this infrastructure gap that we have is closed.
What is the thinking of the president concerning the infrastructure development that we are having right now? What's the thinking of the president? Which infrastructure is he really geared towards right now?
So I think there's a number of critical projects that the administration has committed to, and the president frequently is asking about the progress and looking into those. Second Niger Bridge has progressed significantly. I think it's greater than 60%. Lagos-Ibadan is at a very advanced stage, the road. If you look at Abuja-Kano road, also making significant progress there. Obviously, the Lagos-Ibadan rail is a critical project for the administration. You see that the Ajaokuta, Kaduna-Kano pipeline, AKK, is also making steady progress. We just announced the Kano-Maradi rail line, and I think there was quite some update on the linkage to Apapa of the rail line as well, which would help us to ease some of our stress at the port. So these are just a few. I mean, I think even the courage and commitment of the administration through the push and leadership of the president to push for NLNG Train 7, which will keep us as one of the premier and largest liquefied natural gas exporters. These are all testaments to the fact that this administration is doing more with less, putting more into the ground on infrastructure by judicious use of our funds. And as I said, with some of the creative and innovative ways of financing infrastructure that are being established, such as Infra-Co, which we're very excited about. I think President Buhari, at the end of his tenure, will be known as the infrastructure president.
If we take a look at what you've just said now, where is the funding coming from in all this? Because I also remember Minister Fashola at that CBN roundtable meeting in March last year. He did mention that we have a lot of projects ongoing. We have a lot of projects we should do, but we do not have the money. So if we take a look at the budget, for example, for 2021 budget, or let's say for 2020, since at least we finished 2020, how much of 2020 budget is in all these projects which you've mentioned? And if there are, can you just mention some of those projects? If we are not seeing 2020's budget in some of those projects, are there some innovative financing models that have come into financing some of these projects which you've mentioned?
Yeah, so I think with all of our critical projects in the administration, we have a clear line of sight to the financing. So if you look at Abuja-Kano Road, Lagos-Ibadan, as well as the Second Niger Bridge, those are under the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund with NSIA. $650 million was given to NSIA as approved by the National Economic Council with the governors. And they are also then using, bonds and other mechanisms to make that 650 large enough to cover all of these projects. And I'm happy to say there's no financing issue with any of those projects. If you look at the Kano Maradi line that I mentioned, it was approved under EPC -F framework in FEC. So the EPC Moto Angel will be the provider of the financing to complete that project. And then through the revenues that are derived, there'll be a repayment schedule. So, and then, we talked about the Obajana-Kaba Road as well as Boni-Bodo Road. Those are all funded under the infrastructure tax, the road tax credit scheme. So
that's the one that Dangote is part of?
Yes, and then, I talked about the AKK pipeline that is being funded through the NNPC as well as some of the vendor financing through the partnerships that are ongoing. So I would say I'm very confident that all of our critical projects that are key for this administration, we have clear line of sight to funding to, but everything we have in the budget is also important. And we're looking at public-private partnerships as well as the additional funding that InfraCo can catalyze to make sure that wherever there are gaps, we can take these projects, move them into the entity, and make sure in a financially prudent and sustainable way, we can find funding to close those projects.
How about the Sukuk bonds? Because I remember that the Sukuk bonds, I think, commenced in, which year now? 2017, for critical road projects. Where are we on that? Because, where are we on that?
I mean, we've executed a couple of rounds of that. There's another one being planned. I heard from the Ministry of Works and Housing that they're planning more. So Sukuk as well, right, is one of those innovative schemes to say that we're not just going to sit down and wait for oil sales and then budgetary allocation to try to complete critical projects. Sukuk was a very innovative financing scheme that will continue, and you'll see more information from the Ministry of Works and Housing on the next round of that.
Because the Sukuk bond was supposed to finance 25 road projects. I don't know if you have an idea of like how many have been completed or how many that are ongoing?
The projects on the first round primarily were executed without issue. What we're looking for now is additional. We're not necessarily looking to close out those ones. Those were
so additional Sukuk bonds for
additional
more roads?
roads, exactly, or additional segments of those existing roads. Because everything that was taken, say, the Suleja to Mina segment, those were completed. So there might be additional segments on some of those roads that will be funded with incremental Sukuk issuance, but we're looking that once we take those bonds, you close out the segments and then you continue on others.
How about the pension funds? Taking from the pension funds for infrastructure, because our pension funds are in trillions of naira. Though we've seen a lot of, people do not really want it. We've seen a lot of kickbacks in terms of, oh, I don't really want it, I don't really want it. Where are we on that? Is the government still going ahead?
No, well, I just think there's a lot of misconception and misinformation around pension funds. The guidelines for pension operators allow for up to 20% of that to be put into infrastructure. We've not been meeting those targets, but when you think about how would a pension fund invest in infrastructure, it's not saying that you just dip your hand in and you take money from pension and then you build a road. Very wrong. And I think that's the perception that many people have. Your pension fund operator is a responsible party to ensure that the monies under its care are judiciously grown and invested to make sure over time the pensioners and the beneficiaries can get a stable return. Just as you would have any type of bond that would be purchased, some of the concepts that are being evaluated is if you create an SPV to say fix the Suleja to Niger road, right, or Kano Katsina, then what could happen very simply is that SPV could issue bonds. The pension fund operator would evaluate the investment based on if they believe it's something that would make a return for their pension participants. And if they felt it made sense, then through the regulation, they can invest some funds into that and get a return similar to how they would invest in any other bonds. So when we say that we want more participation of pension in infrastructure, we want it in a very defined, transparent, and structured manner, similar to how pensions operate in any investment they do. There's a lot of scaremongering, I should say, that government is trying to dip its hands in and take pension money.
Do you think perhaps that is also coming as a result of, for those of you that are saddled with those officers, should do more communication?
I would agree.
And send information to the general public on that, such as we're doing today.
I would absolutely agree. I think, misconception spreads when there's no counterfactual communication. But I do believe I saw the NSIA managing director, Mr. Oji, on a few programs when the news story first broke out. And we're going to continue to counter that narrative. But there's no plan by the government to dip its hands into anybody's pension. Those are very important monies. If anything, President Buhari has done a lot to make sure historical pension arrears, be it in the aviation sector or others, are paid to beneficiaries in our mantra of transparency and accountability in government.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that, Engineer. I hope you'll see me soon. Or I will see you soon. Which one?
Either way.
Either way, so that we can talk about it. Let's give this time and see how InfraCo will definitely pan out.
Yeah, and I believe CBN, NSI, AFC will all also do additional engagements. But we're here to provide clarification. It's a good thing, and we're very proud to be able to have passed this milestone. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much. All right, I've been speaking with Engineer Ahmad Zakari, who is the Special Advisor to President Buhari on infrastructure.